And welcome to the Industry 4.0 Community Podcast, sponsored by 4.0 Solutions and the Mastermind Accelerator Program, 16 weeks. I am your host with the most, Walker D. Reynolds. We have Zach and Vaughn here. We put this podcast together because lots of announcements, lots of shit going on. We were like, as a team, hey, we need to do a podcast. We need to do it live with the community. Let's put it together. Let's make it happen. And that is what we're doing. Let me start with Zach and Vaughn. What's up, guys?
This doesn't feel live.
It doesn't feel. It's funny is you guys are in the office. So Zach and Vaughn both flew out here. They're both here. They're actually right down the hall. We were originally going to do this like at a table, and we decided not to. But today the plan is we're probably going to run 75 to 90 minutes on this because there's a lot to discuss. There's a big discussion about OPC UA. The title here is like OPC UA, the definitive discussion. I'm going to give you my total laydown on OPC UA. I'm going to talk about a conversation I've been having with members of the OPC Foundation, the good, the bad, the ugly. Conversation I had with Arlen Nipper today. We're going to be doing a podcast with Arlen on Friday. So today's Tuesday, April 9th, Friday, April 12th at the third hour of our mastermind session. We're doing a podcast with Arlen. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But with that, let's start with Vaughn and Zach. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
I'm doing pretty good. The eclipse was amazing yesterday, dude. That was crazy.
So for those of you who don't, for those of you who know, we're in Dallas. We were in the path for the full eclipse. Yesterday we were at the gym when the eclipse came through. So myself, my youngest son Hayden, Zach, his daughter Zoe, Vaughn's son Holden, we were actually at the gym in the parking lot, and we got a bunch of great footage of the eclipse. This is actually the second full eclipse I've seen. I saw one when I was in the third grade in 1983 in upstate New York. Like the eclipse came through when I was a little kid, and we looked like in these little boxes. It's weird, like everyone's wearing glasses looking up at the eclipse, but like when I was a kid, we were all looking at the eclipse like through a reflection in a box. But if you haven't experienced a full eclipse, it was the second of my life, you definitely want to do it. I mean, it's just so you want to be somewhere where you can see a 360 degree horizon, because it looks like sunrise. For the moment where the sun is blocked out, it looks like sunrise 360 degrees around you, but it's still night, and you can see the stars, and the birds are freaking out, and it's just really weird. It's like broad daylight.
Very surreal.
Yeah, it's really surreal. So there's another full eclipse next year, I think, going through like France and Spain. So
we're going to be doing a community meetup.
Yeah, we're going to go out there and I want to fly to Europe next year for it. My youngest son and I want to do it. So, all right, let's do the announcements real quick. So for those of you who are in the Northeast, I'm going to be speaking. I'm actually giving the primary keynote address at the Digital Transformation Forum on May 1st. That conference is May 1st, May 2nd, right? I'll be giving my keynote at 9 a.m. May 1st. That's in Boston, Mass. Retroactively, the guys will put the link in the description here on YouTube. Hanover Messe, we're going to be at Hanover Messe Monday through Thursday. I think I'm flying there Sunday of Hanover Messe and then flying back Friday. So we'll be there for 4 days. It is a packed schedule. We're doing meetups. We're doing a dinner with Portainer. We're going to be doing a community meetup at the Portainer booth. We will announce all that stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn. So for those of you who are members of the community, if you follow us on YouTube, we're going to make an announcement about doing a meetup with at the Portainer booth or one of the Portainer partners. We're going to be doing a thing at the Litmus booth, the Litmus automation booth. I'm not quite sure. I know they want me to do a fireside chat. We're trying to coordinate that. I did a post on LinkedIn about, hey, we're going to be there if you guys want to meet up. And we ended up getting, like, the response was overwhelming, and we weren't able to fit everybody in. Like, basically from, 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, all 4 days I'm booked back to back to back to back to back. It's going to be nonstop. I'm not going to want to talk to people for 2 weeks or something once I get back, because I'm actually a very introverted person. So, but I'll be speaking at the Litmus booth Tuesday, April 23rd, starting at 4:30 in the afternoon, local time in Germany, in Hanover. We're coordinating a community meetup. We don't know what the date or time is yet. We're still working with Neil Cresswell at Portainer on getting that coordinated. And then for those of you, you should probably already be familiar, but we're doing a Mastermind Accelerator program. We have a lot of new members in Mastermind. I think something like 100 new members in the Mastermind program since the fourth quarter of last year. Like literally that many new people. And just like we did an accelerator a couple of years ago, like the number one comment was, holy shit, there's a lot here. I don't know where to start. So we're doing an accelerator program for people who are already in Mastermind. So if you're already in Mastermind, you get the accelerator program is already part of your tuition. Okay. It's going to kick off in June. It's going to be 16 weeks. Zach's going to be leading the weekly sessions, but it's going to be including educational content from me. Sign up is active. If you are not in Mastermind, you can join the accelerator program, which is going to include content through the first 23 sessions of Mastermind. So I think we're on step 38, 39, right? We've done 38 or 39 4-hour sessions.
The first 16 steps, which is over a year's worth of content. Yeah.
So we're going to be doing an accelerator program, 16 weeks. You can do that. You still get $1,000 off until April 12th at midnight.
Correct.
How much is it? Okay.
So it's a $14.95 right now.
It's $14.95 right now, and the primary price is $2,500.
Well, $2,500 or $3,000 if you compare it to Mastermind.
Right, and then a Mastermind subscription for a whole year is $3,000. So, yeah. All right. So let's talk about that's all the announcements. One other announcement.
We need like 10 more people to sign up this week. So we are looking for some, we've got about 20 people that signed up. We need to hit at least 30 in order for us to hit our minimum targets. So
in terms of what our costs, so for those of you who don't know on the education, let's ask this. I get this fucking comment all the time on YouTube. We give away as much education as we possibly can for free. Okay. I mean, the general rule is if it requires 45 minutes of effort or less for me, then we're giving it away for free. By the way, I'd give everything away for free if it were up to me. It's just why that's why I didn't even know the price of this, because I'm not part of any of those discussions. Because I'm always going to default to give it away. The general rule is 45 minutes or less, we do it for free. It's included on YouTube. We'll do it on LinkedIn. We'll do whatever. And we probably spend about $60,000 per month just doing free content. I mean, literally, it's that much. I mean, we spend a lot of money producing content. We have a whole team, and it costs about $60,000, give or take. So all of that is supported by the community. I think now we have it's like 900 people total paid students between mentorship and Mastermind. And there's a whole IIoT.University is changing completely. There's a whole revamping. I'm going to talk about a couple of that stuff here in a second, but I really want to talk about this OPC UA discussion. I want to get to it. There's a lot of questions about, like, people will come on a YouTube video and they'll say, can you, they'll want you to explain some technical lesson that would require like 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours worth of work to be able to answer that question completely. Right. And the reality is that we just can't scale that. There's, I have a finite amount of time in my day. By the way, I spent the last 4 days having literally the bulk of everything I've done over the last 4 days is this OPC UA discussion with a member of the Part 14 working group at OPC UA. We're going to go into this in depth, and I'm going to give you my definitive position on OPC. Okay. I'm going to talk about the original email that Stefan Hoppe sent to me in 2020. We're going to talk about why is it Arlen Nipper and these guys are not, why are the people who invented MQTT not part of the OPC Foundation when the OPC Foundation's writing Part 14 saying you should use MQTT. We're going to talk about all this stuff. There's a lot of questions here, and I use incendiary language. I'll say part 14 from OPC UA is garbage, right? I use that term. I'm going to explain why I use that term. Okay. But a lot of people ask questions about, will you do a video on X, Y, or Z? And we try to get to every video we possibly can. We really do. I mean, just to have Vaughn and Zach out here this week, we spend, I don't know, whatever, $7,000, $8,000, fly them out here, put them up, get them in the studio. And then you got my time, which is $1,200 an hour. It's expensive to do this stuff. Okay. There's two reasons why there's certain content that we're only giving away to certain students. Okay. We're giving the in-depth stuff, the personal attention to the people who support the community. We have 900 people all over the world who are financially supporting everything we do, but we touch 1 million people. We have literally had 1 million unique viewers on LinkedIn and YouTube consume our content. Okay. And since we've
had 500,000 on X in the last month too.
Yeah. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million people are benefiting from the content, but only 1,000 are supporting it. And that's okay. By the way, those numbers that's how it works. Okay. It's one out of every 1,000 people who benefit are financially supporting. But that's what it takes for us to be able to build a university, and that's what it takes. Okay. So if you want, when you want to get to the technical stuff about Industry 4 and digital transformation, and you're ready for the technical lesson, get this question all the time. Where should I start? First and foremost, go to iiot.university and take the IIoT mini course, which, by the way, we are redoing. So there is a free IIoT mini course. How many hours?
80. Well, we have 8,300 students in the IIoT mini course. It's about 2 hours of content.
So it's 2 hours of content and gives you the base lesson. We are reshooting all those videos. We already shot one of the what is digital transformation, or we do what is IIoT, right? We did what is IIoT.
We did what is Digital Factory 2024.
Digital Factory
2024.
We're reshooting all those videos right now. So the IIoT mini course is going to be updated for 2024. Okay. Start with the IIoT mini course. Okay. Number 2, go to iiot.university/Discord and sign up for the Discord server. Okay. I'm going to be reading a conversation that we've been having in the Discord server in the OPC UA channel. There are thousands of people in that Discord server who are incredibly digitally fluent. Basically any question you have is going to be answered in the Discord server somewhere. There's a lot there, and there's a learning curve. It's like, how the hell do I find what I'm even looking for? Okay. But join the Discord server, and you've got this whole community of people who are there to support you. Okay. Then if your interest is piqued, then maybe you take a look at Mastermind at iiot.university, or you take a look at mentorship or one of the individual workshops, which we put a lot of effort into creating. And, but don't pay anything for your education until you're sure you're ready to make that move. All right. With that, let's get into this OPC UA discussion. All right. So let's start with.
Take us all the way back. How did this begin?
All right. So if you guys go on our YouTube channel, there are many videos where I talk about OPC UA. Here's basically what happened. There was a conversation, in 2017 or 2018, 2019, 2020, when we were originally talking to manufacturers about digital infrastructure. Okay. What is digital transformation? Is a strategy for unlocking the potential in the data in your business. It's all about, I'm going to become a data-driven company. Okay, data is going to be the primary commodity, not the widget that's coming off the line. We're still going to sell that, but the primary commodity in our business, the thing where we unlock the most value, is going to be in the data, which comes from all the events, from all the smart things in our businesses. If you want to know how Amazon predicts what you're going to buy 6 weeks before you buy it, that's how they do it. Data is the primary commodity in their business. If you want to know how Tesla develops full self-driving or is able to become the top car manufacturer in the world without having any car dealerships, or they're able to manufacture cars that have an average of 5 maintenance incidents in the first 3 years of ownership, compared to Chrysler, which has 500 maintenance incidents in the first 3 years. It's because Tesla's a data-driven company. They're literally a data company who manufactures cars. That's what digital transformation is. It's about making data the primary commodity. You have to create infrastructure, digital infrastructure, to do that. The way a lot of people were trying to do that, the way Azure, and we're going to talk about Azure IoT here, how Microsoft tried to capitalize on the market
Digital thread.
Way back when, was digital thread, right? And we've done lessons on the difference between digital thread and unified namespace and all that kind of stuff. Digital thread, let me say this, is garbage. Digital thread is not a way of becoming a digital company. It's not how Amazon does it. It's not how Tesla does it. It's not how Volkswagen North America does it. It's not how the most digital companies in the world do it. You know who's using digital thread? Ignorant people. People who are being lied to and fooled by salespeople from companies that are trying to capitalize on digital. Okay? This is why I talk about values all the time. When you're talking to a vendor, you're talking to a service provider, you are talking, somebody who makes hardware, software, or sells services in industry. The very first fucking question you should ask them is, what do you believe? What do you stand for? What are your values? What is your mission? And don't let the sales guy, who's the slimy sales guy, give you the prepackaged answer. Okay, push back against them. Dig deep when they give you the mission statement. Tell me how you make that a reality. Okay? Tell me how you execute on that mission. When they give you the list of values, say, give me an example of when you were faced with a dilemma and you used your values to make the right decision, not the one that was in your best interest. Okay? That's first and foremost. Okay? Let me say this. There's a wonderful video that Rob Tiffany and 3 other developers, you can go to our LinkedIn and read this. And we actually did a short on this just recently. Go to our YouTube shorts. You can see the short of it. There's a wonderful video that Rob Tiffany and 3 of the other developers. I had dinner with Rob Tiffany a couple weeks ago when he was here in Dallas. Wonderful guy, super fucking smart. He knows his shit. Serial entrepreneur, but he was part of the original Azure IoT team way back when, 16, 17, 18. And they had this video that they did a podcast, and they explained the beginning of Azure IoT. And in a nutshell, you should watch their whole podcast. Don't just take my summary. But in a nutshell, what they said was this. The original Azure IoT was just us putting a bunch of junk together. That's it. They use the term junk. Okay, it's not me using the word junk. We put a bunch of junk together, and we were just kind of trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? We were trying to figure out how to do digital for Microsoft Azure IoT. The salespeople at Microsoft, they actually talk about this. They go, and I'm going to paraphrase here. The salespeople at Microsoft are so arrogant. Their hubris is so overwhelming. They're like, we're Microsoft. We can get a meeting with anybody because we're Microsoft. And what they do is they go to these customers and they fucking lie to them. They sell them a bill of goods. Okay, they sell them a bill of goods. They make promises that their platform didn't deliver on. Okay, and the developers knew it. In this podcast, they talked about it. We knew it was junk, and we knew it wasn't doing what the salespeople were saying it was doing. The customers eventually figured it out. The customers eventually realized it was junk. I was saying it was junk in 16, 17, and 18. I was saying it was junk in 16, 17, and 18. Part of that conversation was Microsoft basically built Azure IoT on 2 primary technologies. One was OPC UA, and one was AMQP, which is their messaging queue protocol. Okay. They are abandoning AMQP for MQTT. In 2018, I said I had already tested AMQP in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and realized it was too verbose to be an IoT protocol for a digital infrastructure. You're not going to scale. Okay. People would ask the question, well, what about OPC UA? And I would say, well, OPC UA is not an IoT protocol. So what is an IoT protocol? It's the Industrial Internet of Things. It is the protocol and standard upon which you build your digital infrastructure. What I mean by that is the core layer where things communicate to one another is your IoT protocol. That doesn't mean you don't have different protocols out on the node level, but it is the core layer of the core communications layer, transport, standard, and protocol.
It's the fabric.
I try not to use the term fabric because people have tried to hijack that term, and I try not to use mesh because
but like when you're using the table analogy, it's the
tablecloth. It's the tablecloth. So the IoT protocol is the tablecloth. The physical infrastructure is the table you put the tablecloth on. The nodes are the glasses and plates and knives and forks that you put on top of the tablecloth. All of those things, the glasses, the plates, the forks, that you want them to all be able to talk to one another natively, just by putting it on the table, we're plugged into the infrastructure and we can see the structure and the events of the business. They all have their own field buses and other protocols they talk. But in order for them to communicate through to one another, primarily they're communicating through the tablecloth, which is your IoT protocol. OPC UA is not an IoT protocol. An IoT protocol must be completely open architecture. It must be edge driven. It must be report by exception, and it must be lightweight. That is your IoT protocol. OPC UA is not those things. And I said that in 2018. Now, Stefan Hoppe sent me this email. Let me open up my Outlook and let's open up Stefan's email. All right. We shot a series of videos about OPC UA. Again, this podcast is the definitive discussion on OPC UA. I'm not going to have this conversation again. Okay. This is the podcast I'm going to point everyone to. What's Walker's opinion on OPC UA? It's this podcast. We're also going to talk about Azure IoT, Highbyte 3.4's new release, what we're seeing in the market. Okay. And we're going to talk about a couple other things before we get out of here. All right. But let's take a look at what Stefan sent to me, Stefan Hoppe, who he is the guy who is the president of the OPC Foundation, who took over from, I think it's Tom Burke. Tom Burke was I don't have any specific opinion on Stefan Hoppe. Whether he's a good guy, bad guy, I don't know him personally. All I know is what he sent to me. So I made a bunch of claims and videos about OPC UA, that it is not fully open architecture. My argument was it's really pay for play. It's a highly bureaucratic political organization where the specification benefits a select group of people. And because it only benefits a select group of people, only a microscopic part of the specification is adopted. In order for it to be open, you should be able to plug into it and know what you're going to talk to. That's open, right? Well, so little of the OPC UA specification has ever been implemented. Ever. And in fact, if you go through and you read the entire specification, all the parts, okay, all the companion specs, all the information models, about only 20% of that spec were we able to say, yep, there's a product that uses this part of the spec. 80% of the specification has never been implemented ever in any product. Okay. All right. So I made some claims in a LinkedIn post and in a YouTube post about OPC UA, and Stefan sent me, a fucking email saying, hey, you're wrong about openness. No company owns OPC. Okay. So that first, number one, he says, sir, your statement about OPC UA are in majority not true. I'd like to get into contact with you and ask you to update your video. The answer is fuck no. I'm not updating my video. Okay. I'm not going to allow some guy who works for Beckoff to tell me what my content's going to be. You can specifically outline what you think is wrong, and he did, and I'm going to talk about it right here. So June 29th of 2020, he sent me this email, and I'm going to go through it. Okay. Number one, openness. He says, no company owns OPC. You do not have to be a member of the OPC Foundation to either implement or use OPC UA. There's no fee for each runtime to be paid. I never said there was a fee to be. What I said is pay to play is more of a corruption term. Okay. Open specs. He says they're all release specifications are public and free of charge. Okay. You have to register for download. Open labs, OPC labs are public, open. Yes, members get discounts, but it's open to increase the quality of each system. There's a lot of what you said is not true, but not true, but, which means it's true. Okay. Open code. The code is free of charge, available on GitHub. I'll give him this. I never said it wasn't free of charge and that there wasn't a GitHub and that there weren't examples available on GitHub. They are, but I would argue that those examples are so wonderful. They're so good that only 20% of the specification that is fucking nearly 20 years old has ever been implemented. Okay. Let's go through his points on openness. No company owns OPC. All right. What is OPC? It is OLE for process control. OLE was developed by Microsoft and is owned by Microsoft. Okay. OLE is owned by Microsoft and it was implemented in Windows 3.11. So for those of you that don't know what OLE is, it's object link and embedding. OPC is a standard for creating that for industry. What was Microsoft's goal with OPC? Microsoft's goal was to basically create an infrastructure upon which they could build an industrial operating system. They started with the specification to get you to use OLE for process control. That is, take object link and embedding and control your processes in your business with it so that we can put an operating system on top of it. Microsoft owns OLE. Moreover, OLE is not really used that often now. It was used in Microsoft Windows 3 and Windows 95 and Windows 98. And it's the way of where applications inside of a Windows operating system can, when you go to the file share, for example, and you're browsing the file share, that's OLE, how you're browsing the file share. If I open up an application and I'm going to click file open inside of my application in Windows and I go file open and it opens up the file browser to select the file, that's OLE for me. OLE is how you do that. So first and foremost, who has the most influence at OPC? It's Microsoft. They own the underlying technology, OLE. Eric Barnstedt is the Azure IoT architect. There are, I'm going to say 40 to 50 working groups. That is various groups that are working on parts of the specification. Fucking Eric Barnstedt is the chair. He's a Microsoft employee, and he is the chair of more working groups than anyone else. And I don't know if it was 12, 14, 16 groups that he's the chair of. Eric Barnstedt answers to Microsoft. He doesn't answer to his customers. He doesn't answer to the foundation. He answers to Microsoft. Okay? Rockwell Automation also has enormous influence. So whether you want to say specific ownership or whether we want to say influence, Microsoft, Rockwell, and Beckhoff have more influence over the OPC Foundation than any other companies in the world. The standard itself is written to benefit those companies. Prove me wrong. By the way, I've invited Stefan to come on our podcast. I've invited Eric Barnstedt to come on our podcast, and I've been talking to Randy Armstrong, who is the chair of the working group for Part 14. Super fucking smart guy, knows his shit. I had this whole conversation with him over the weekend that we're going to go through. I invited him multiple times to come on the podcast and have this conversation publicly. He chose not to do that. Okay, so I'm going to have the conversation without him. All right. Now, if, many times people would accuse me of saying things that weren't true, and I would say, okay, come on here and just prove that I'm wrong. You want to know why no one from the OPC Foundation comes on this podcast? Because I will ask them questions they won't be able to answer. Because I know there are details, there's things that have happened in the inner workings that people have shared with me that I would be able to ask them, what about this situation? And they would be looking like a fucking deer in headlights on the podcast. They wouldn't be able to answer. Okay. So that's why no one comes on here. If you want to know why no one from the OPC Foundation comes on this podcast, is because they know I'm going to ask them questions they will not have an answer for. Now, I'm not shitting on OPC Foundation. There's a lot of wonderful fucking people there. Okay, there's a lot of people who dedicate a lot of time. Randy Armstrong is one of them, who dedicate a lot of time to writing specifications to benefit industry. But the leadership at the OPC Foundation cares about three groups: Microsoft, Beckhoff, and Rockwell. Okay, so when he says no company owns OPC, what is an owner? An owner is a person in an organization who has the most influence in the organization. Okay? If you hate if you hate what OPC UA is, you blame Microsoft, you blame Beckhoff, and you blame Rockwell. Because they are the ones who have the primary influence. And if you think I'm wrong, just say it. Put it in a comment down below. Challenge my thinking. Prove me wrong. I have no problem being wrong here. In fact, I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. All right. He says you don't have to be a member of the OPC Foundation to either implement or use OPC UA. Here's the problem. I had this conversation with Arlen Nipper, and hopefully this wasn't in confidence. I don't think it was. We're going to talk about this in the podcast, so I don't think it was. Arlen Nipper, when Tom Burke was originally the president at the OPC Foundation, Arlen and Wes, who are the guys who at CirrusLink, and Wes works for Arlen. Wes is I think he's the CTO, and he does the bulk of the module development for CirrusLink, and Arlen is the co-inventor of MQTT. When the OPC Foundation wanted to incorporate MQTT in their spec with Part 14, they obviously went to the inventor of MQTT to bring him in. Well, they were there for a certain amount of time, I think a year or so, and then they left because of the politics. Okay, now if you ask Randy Armstrong says Arlen left because Arlen wanted to use Google's protobuf for encoding in MQTT, and the rest of the group wanted to use their binary encoding that they already had. Okay, and that's why Arlen left. That isn't why Arlen left. Arlen left because of the politics at OPC Foundation. The politics that are driven by Microsoft, Rockwell, and Beckhoff. Okay? Why do I get to say these things? It's because I'm rich. It's because I have fuck you money. I get to say these things because Microsoft, Rockwell, and Beckhoff can't hurt me. Siemens can't hurt. Nobody can hurt me. My money's tied up in trusts. They could sue me. They'd never get a fucking penny. Okay? I'm gonna be rich till the day I die. This is the reason Rick Bellotta gets to be an asshole. This is the reason why Rick gets to troll people on LinkedIn and Discord. Because Rick knows his shit, and he's got fuck you money. We have a responsibility. If I don't do this, if someone like Rick doesn't do this, if other people don't do this, if we don't do it, no one will. You have to be a slave to these large organizations who wield their influence and compel you to do what they want you to do. But just by the adoption of OPC UA, we know that it doesn't really benefit industry the way it was meant to. I wish it would, but it doesn't. Okay, let's go to number 2. Stefan says, report by exception, OPC UA is just poll response. I did not say it was just poll response. I said it is poll response, and it is by default. Why? OPC DA was built on COM technology, DA and COM. Okay, the original DA. UA, what we have today, is a descendant of the original DA specification. Actually, it was the original OPC Classic and then DA, and that was all built on COM technology. That was all built pre-1998 when TCP/IP won the protocol wars, where all of the OT infrastructure was serial. That all serial networks were poll response. The specification was written for the infrastructures that existed. Okay, so he says poll response. He goes, this is also not true. He says OPC UA delivers all. Client server, poll response, client server where a client can subscribe only once to stop polling for updates, and the server is delivering the updates. In addition, OPC UA delivers also publisher to subscriber via UDP or also MQTT. Well, first off, why would you use UDP when UDP is non-deterministic? Okay, the difference between UDP and TCP is that UDP sends a message out there and never confirms whether or not, you don't know whether or not it was received. That's the fundamental difference. That's why TCP won the protocol wars. Okay, and when at the time when he wrote this email in 2020, it was the original specification of Part 14, which was not only garbage, it was useless. It was useless. Here's how you know it's useless. No one adopted it. No products were implementing MQT Part 14. And even with the newest version of Part 14, which, by the way, is a much better version, 1.05 that came out in December of 2023, is a much better specification. But hey, it is still incredibly difficult to implement. Randy Armstrong says, hey, listen, I can do this in a couple of lines of code. And I keep asking him the question, Randy, why would I use Part 14 to implement OPC UA over MQTT when I could just do it with MQTT 5 much easier? I don't have to learn the spec. Me, not as I understand why a device manufacturer would implement Part 14. Like if Easy Automation, Siemens, Opto22, if they want to put an OPC server on their PLC, and then they want to integrate that with an MQTT broker, and they want to be able to send all the metadata and the information models from OPC UA, you would use Part 14. But guess what? None of the fucking device manufacturers are doing it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the specification now is 280 pages long. Part 14 is a sub-part of OPC UA. It's 280 fucking pages.
Part 14 is 280 pages?
Yeah, but from the original spec, which was 160 something, I think, or 180, they added 100 pages to the specification. Okay? I am doing a test right now. MQTT 5, Sparkplug, Part 14 OPC UA. Okay? And I said, as part of the conversation with Randy, I said I was going to do this. Okay? So originally started on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn, or actually started on Andreas Vogler's LinkedIn. This is the only way that Eric Barnstedt and I ever interact on LinkedIn, is because Eric Barnstedt has his LinkedIn, not just him. I don't want to pick on Eric, but Eric is a leader at the OPC Foundation, and he's the Azure IoT architect at Microsoft, but he only allows people who are connected to him or someone he tags in a post to comment on his posts. Now, let me ask you this. Why would he do that? Anybody can comment on my posts. I am a world-class asshole. I put myself out here. I give my opinions. Everyone hears my opinions. They are strong opinions. When I put a LinkedIn post up there, anybody can comment on there. And if somebody comes at me, throws a haymaker, as long as they are dealing in the facts, they can be a dick if they want to. But if they're dealing in the facts, I'm going to engage with them, and I'm going to prove they're wrong. Or I'm going to apologize and admit I was wrong. But that isn't what Eric Barnstedt does. And you have to ask why. Why?
Control the message.
If you are a leader,
because Microsoft represents some of the same values that OPC stands for.
That's correct.
It's open. We're used by a lot of vendors.
Right. So
you get to control the message.
Is OPC UA report by exception? The answer is it can be if implemented in a certain way. But not really. Even if you implement with Part 14, it's not truly report by exception. All you gotta do is sniff the wire. There's a lot of shit that is sent from a Part 14 compliant client to a broker that is not report by exception. And why is report by exception matter? Why does report by exception matter, Zach? Why do you want report by exception and not pull response? There's two.
So scalability, when your whole enterprise is sending data, there's no way to scale it if you do pull response. Correct.
Moreover, pull response requires inbound ports to be open. Two reasons.
Outbound only, yeah. No inbound open ports.
No inbound open ports. Okay, that's why it's important. So when Stefan said this, when I said it's just pull response, I didn't say that. I said it is pull response, and it is by default. Okay. Number 3, lightweight. This is just fucking a joke, an absolute joke. He says, lightweight, you are comparing apples and oranges. No, I'm not. I'm making an absolute statement. It's not lightweight. It isn't lightweight. OPC UA is anything but lightweight. It is literally so unbelievably verbose. There's a video I'm going to do. So the guy, the CTO at SESME, did a video. He did a short, and I can't remember the guy's name. He said he said the specification you use doesn't matter, right? He said the protocol doesn't matter, right? And he says protocol doesn't matter. Stop talking about the protocol. Bullshit, it doesn't fucking matter. Bullshit, it don't matter. Okay, what have you fucking? Don't come on with me. Come on a panel with me. Come on a panel with Gilad Longer. Come on a panel with Kyle Chase. Come on a panel with anybody an architect who builds this shit, and tell me the protocol you pick for your IIoT protocol doesn't fucking matter. Like, it is a dumbass statement. But what he says there, he says the protocol doesn't matter. You got to deal with the protocol that's in the infrastructure. No, you don't. You got to deal with it at the edge, maybe. Throw a gateway in there and convert it into your IoT protocol. But the protocol you use matters. It does. Okay? But I had a conversation with Sesame a few years ago. And I don't know if it was their CTO or another guy. And we were talking, and I said to him, hey, they wanted to use my platform. They wanted me to raise the profile of Sesame because it was still nascent, right? By the way, love John Van Dyke, love the folks at Sesame. I'm not trying to trash them. We definitely disagree on OPC UA versus, I don't agree with their direction on OPC UA, okay? And I was telling him that. And I said, OPC UA is too verbose. How is it going to apply for most manufacturers? There's too much on the wire. And he acknowledged. He said, but I can't say that publicly. Guess what? I can. Okay. There is nothing about OPC UA that is lightweight. Stefan, I can't believe you had the fucking balls to write that. But here's what he said. He said, you're comparing apples and oranges. He said the smallest commercial UA server is 236 kilobytes of RAM. Okay. Well, first off, I'm not talking about resources on the fucking machine. I'm talking about what's sent over the wire. Okay. Just doing OPC UA pub sub is half page of code, and it fits into an 8-bit controller and 2 kilobits of SRAM, identical to MQTT. It's not identical to what's on the wire. By the way, an OPC UA payload is 25 times the size of a Sparkplug payload. 25 times the size. And then when you incorporate poll response versus, let's say you don't do pub sub, and you go MQTT Sparkplug or MQTT5 versus OPC UA, now you move to 90 times impact. 25 by default, just on what's on the wire, and then just the fact that one is edge-driven and one's poll response, so now we're checking for changes, it goes to a 90x. Okay, and that's all empirically driven benchmarking. He says, OPC UA can be heavy in case you integrate everything, including security management, which, by the way, everyone talks about is the reason you can't use MQTT and Sparkplug is because it's insecure. It's not. But one of the things they hold up with OPC UA is security management. And he's saying, well, if you use security management, yeah, it'll be heavyweight. So then what the fuck did I say that wasn't true?
But he said, it's only don't use security when talking about whether or not it's lightweight, but then when talking about the reasons why you would want to use it,
correct,
then use security.
He said some other untrue stories. He said, correct is majority of PLC vendors have OPC UA integrated into PLC. Just the stupid vendors did not. So that was what he wrote in here. Stupid vendors don't have OPC integrated onto their PLCs. Okay. Do you know... First off, the vast majority of PLC manufacturers do not have OPC integrated on their hardware. The vast majority. In fact, on my test board over there, the Siemens S7-1200 has an OPC server I could use. Okay. I could do OPC out of S7-1200, and I could do one out of that Easy Logix PLC on there. There are 8 other devices on there that I couldn't. So 2 out of 10, 20% have an OPC server on it. Okay. The reality is that a lot of manufacturers have line cards with really lightweight hardware that they determine they are not going to accept the overhead of putting OPC on board. We're not going to put OPC on board. We don't want to take the development time. It's a lot of work to implement OPC. I told Randy Armstrong, and I had this conversation in Discord, and I told Randy, when the guys from Easy Automation, I cannot remember, forgive me, Vikram, he's the president of, Vikram is the president of Easy Automation. He reached out, me, him, and Arlen Nipper were having a conversation. This is back when I operated in my garage. This is like 2016, 2015. They implemented Sparkplug B and MQTT3 on the easy rack PLCs in one day. 6 hours of total work, writing all the code and then giving you the option to either transport as a Sparkplug B payload. So that is, I could turn an easy rack PLC into a Sparkplug node and stream it into a broker, or I could just send it flat. They did that in one day. I have a 6 hours total, including unit testing and beta testing. CMT SVR, which is made by Maple Systems, they added in the exact same feature, took them 2 days. And the only reason it took them 2 days is because it had to go to Taiwan for approval after they wrote the firmware. Okay, you're not doing that. You are not implementing OPC UA in 6 hours or 2 days. That's why most hardware doesn't have it, because they're saying we're not going to put that effort in there. All right, so that was what Stefan said. Hopefully, I mean, he put a bunch of other, like, hey, what are we doing in the future? I want to be fair to Stefan here real quick. I have nothing against Stefan Hoppe whatsoever. What I'm saying is that what he wrote to me in this email, complaining about my statements about OPC UA, I just debunked everything he said. Okay, and Stefan is more than welcome to come on here and tell me I'm a liar. Now, what I will say is it's 4 years later. So what's happened in 4 years? They wrote a better version of Part 14. So 1.05, the new version that came out in December of 2023, is a better version. Also, there are people at the OPC Foundation who have acknowledged something that they weren't acknowledging 4 years ago.
It's an OT protocol.
It's an OT protocol. I was saying it's not an IIoT.
You said it's not the future of IIoT.
I said it's not the future of IIoT. It belongs on the edge, L1 and L2. Guess who now acknowledges that? Members of the OPC Foundation. It is an OT protocol, and that's where it belongs. OT is on the edge. That's where it belongs. And that's all I've been saying all along. A lot of things have changed in the last 4 years. Oh, also, Azure IoT threw their fucking platform out and built a new one. Guess where that came from? That came from a meeting I had with Microsoft's global architect in March of 2022. And I went through why it is Azure IoT is getting kicked out of all of our customers. Why they're dropping Azure and they're going to AWS. It also comes from the fact that multiple multinationals hired me to peer review Accenture and Microsoft's infrastructure. And you know how easy it was for me to say, don't use Azure IoT and Azure Digital Twin? Literally, they put the reference architecture up on the screen, and I would just walk up there and I would point to the center of their reference architecture where they had Digital Twin on the right-hand side and they had the OT infrastructure on the left-hand side. They had all their Azure IoT edge gateways. And I would say, how are you going to reconcile the namespace here in OT with the namespace here on the IT side on your in Digital Twin? And it would be crickets. Because they didn't want to admit that it had to be done on both sides. Any change I make here, I got to make over there. And any change I make here, I got to make over there. It wasn't self-aware. It was that easy. Okay. Now, the new Azure IoT architecture, which I shared those reference diagrams, which, by the way, Eric Barnstedt sent me a DM on LinkedIn, is like, you're sharing confidential information and blah, 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 blah. They ended up releasing Azure IoT early, as far as I know it, is a much better infrastructure. But at no point has Microsoft or the OPC Foundation admitted their faults. Yet they still claim that I'm saying things that are untrue. But I know for a fact they agree with me. They know that what I've said is true. How do I know? Because members of the OPC Foundation have told me publicly in the Discord server, you're right. It's an OT protocol. Yes, they had no history. What I told Accenture was that was later. That was with just one customer. There were 3 that hired me. With one multinational, they asked me, hey, I said to Accenture, can you give me a single example of a enterprise infrastructure that is built on that reference architecture? One successful digital transformation initiative. They had 6, Accenture had like 6 people on the table. They were so fucking pissed I said that. At the end, by the way, at the end of that meeting, what I said at the end of that meeting was, hey, I think you guys should do this. What I told the customer was, I said, here's what's going to happen at 90 days. Here's what you should expect at 6 months. Here's what you should expect at 12 to 18 months. When it happens, give me a call. My team's in the room. I said, I think that Accenture and this team, they should have the freedom to try and do what they want to do if you're willing to pay for it. And we'll come back in and clean up the mess. Okay. When I left the room, I said, I'm going to leave and go back to Dallas. I literally just left. I told him the guy, the chief technical, or he was a director or vice president of IT, executive vice president. He comes out into the hall for the customer. He says, by the way, I agree with you. He goes, I know it's not going to work. This is a political decision. No one ever gets fired for picking Microsoft. We have to let them fail. He says, but I want you to stay a part of this process so that we can ramp up quickly. By the way, they're still our customer. And guess who's not there?
Accenture.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's pivot over to this other discussion. All right. Let me go to Discord here. Let me start off by saying, if you guys are a member of the, if you're a member of the Discord server, you can read this whole conversation in the OPC UA channel. So if you go to Discord and read, I want to start off by saying this. Andreas Vogler did a post making some complaints about Part 14. Okay, and I commented in my LinkedIn. Let me go to my LinkedIn so I can read what Andres actually said, so I don't misspeak. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot in here. Zach, do you want to fill in the Vaughn? You guys want to chime in while I'm looking for this real quick? What are your thoughts? Zach, what are your thoughts on this?
I think Randy thought you didn't know what you were talking about at first, and then realized that you kind of did know the specification
inside and out. I've read Part 14 hundreds and hundreds of times, at least 100 times. All right, here we go. This is Andreas Vogler, is the technology management for Siemens factory automation.
Oh, you're pulling up the LinkedIn post.
I'm pulling up the LinkedIn post, and because this is where the conversation with OPC, when the OPC Foundation, the chair for Part 14 came from. This is an important conversation. By the way, I would argue that this conversation in the OPC UA channel is probably the most important conversation that's ever taken place in the Discord. Okay. But Andreas said, OPC UA pub sub MQTT reference publisher. Is there something wrong? I tried out the C# reference implementation of OPC UA pub sub. You can access that. If you do OPC Foundation, go to GitHub and look up the OPC Foundation, you can find the code he was using. He says, at startup, the console publisher publishes 2 metadata messages, one for dataset writer 1 and one for dataset writer 2 on a single retained topic. So a new subscriber will only get the last retained message and not both metadata information. So basically what he's saying is if you send the metadata to the same, you send metadata 1 payload to the topic and a client is not connected, what happens is metadata 2 gets published to the same client. Same topic, if a client connects after 1 has been published, it's only going to get the second half of the metadata. Okay. He says, so a new subscriber is only going to get the last retained message, not both payloads. So they're 2 different messages, not an update of the same message. He goes, does anyone know the right way to do this? Is this somehow defined in the spec? I guess every dataset writer must have its own topic, not as shown in the reference implementation. Yes, that is kind of the idea here. Andreas Vogler tagged Eric Barnstedt in that post. Now, because he tagged Eric and Andreas and I are connected, this is a conversation where Eric and I could actually converse with one another, because I don't follow Eric. We are not connected. He hasn't blocked me, but he's blocked a lot of people in our community. I think Henry Marini is one of them. So this is what I posted. I said, Andreas just found one of the many limitations to Part 14. And I think Matthew Paris might want to chime in on this. The simple fact is there is no right way to do this with Part 14, because Part 14 was written by people who have never worked on the plant floor and have no idea how to write an inclusive specification for event-driven architecture that applies to all use cases. How do you do that? You write a minimalist specification, not a maximalist specification. Sparkplug B is about 60, 70 pages, and Part 14 is 268 or 280, and most of it's optional. There's very little in the Sparkplug specification that's optional, because what they put in the specification is the things you absolutely need to do. Now, Sparkplug's got its own limitations. All right. Now, I'm not singing the praises of Sparkplug. I'm just saying it is minimalist, which means it's way more flexible. There are ways to do what Andreas is asking to do, but there's no standard way to do it. I said the C# reference is an extension of a flawed Part 14. OPC UA is not intended for interoperability. It is intended to sell products from Microsoft and Rockwell and Beckhoff. The answer to your question, Andreas, is no. It is not defined in the spec. However, there is an example of using two separate dataset writers to do what you're trying to do. Welcome to reality. OPC UA pub sub is nothing short of complete garbage. There are many reasons that no one outside of the working group is using it. And by the way, that is accurate. The only implementations of Part 14 are from people in the working group. I would love you, and I said, I would love OPC UA to be what it was intended to be, but I accept things for what they are. Part 14 is a very poor example of a monkey patch for OPC UA. And it really is a monkey patch. All right, this started a whole, Eric Barnstedt chimed in and said, hey, Randy Armstrong, this is your baby. Do you want to chime in here? And then Randy and I start going through an exchange on LinkedIn, and then it moved to Discord. And rather than read all the messages, I'm just going to refer you to the OPC UA channel in Discord if you want to read the whole thing. But I'm going to give you the summary. Okay, I'm going to give you the summary here.
Give us the blow by blow.
In a nutshell, I'm gonna read a couple of pieces, a couple of passages that I put in here.
People need to know why it's the best conversation that's ever happened in Discord, though.
Here's why. Here's why it's the best conversation. Randy Armstrong is the first major player at the OPC Foundation who's ever engaged with this community. Mm-hmm. Okay, that doesn't mean specifically me. Okay. In a nutshell, Randy basically calls me a troll. He says, I know nothing about the specification. Okay, I'm just throwing haymakers at him, and I don't know what I'm talking about. The whole Discord conversation is me demonstrating I do know what I'm talking about. Okay, to the point where I said, okay, I'll do this in Sparkplug, MQTT5, and Part 14, and I'll publish it to GitHub, and everybody can see the examples. Okay, let me start out by saying here, Randy Armstrong is a brilliant dude, and I really, really appreciate it. Like, he has top-notch character. Okay, character is who we are when no one's watching. Okay, I have no question Randy Armstrong is of the utmost character. I have no question that Randy Armstrong knows his shit. Okay, he and I definitely have philosophical differences on, what is actual security risk, what is actual security. We have differing opinions, philosophical opinions. I'm not going to talk about those here. What I'm going to talk about is the meat and potatoes. And the meat and potatoes was perception's reality. When you say OPC UA, when you say OPC server, when you say OPC UA, what does the average person think?
Kep server EX.
Kep server EX, right?
Kepware.
The first thing most people think of is a data aggregator like Kep server. Okay. Kep server has a bunch of drivers that talk native languages to devices, field buses, example, and then basically allows you to build tags, which are variable nodes in OPC UA, and then allows you to build a server that an OPC client can connect to, and then read all the variable nodes plus all the metadata.
Typically just your SCADA software that's connecting to it.
Correct. Again, it's OLE for process control, right? When you say OPC UA, the vast majority of people are going to think Kep server EX, OPC server, right? That's perception's reality. And I said that. This entire conversation was us going through and saying, it was a whole conversation going through and saying, Randy, what good is a standard if no one adopts it? Like I even at one point, let me get to the money post. It was a really long one.
The money post.
This is what I said. We were having a conversation in there, but I'm going to read one of my comments. Randy said, Sparkplug is a nightmare for security because a device connected that has some writable points allows everyone with access to the broker the ability to write by default. To make matters worse, the device has no way to know who initiated the write operation. While it is possible to lock down write access using the MQTT broker vendor's proprietary APIs, they're not proprietary. ACLs are part of the spec. This is not a standards-based solution. Yes, it is. ACLs are part of the spec. Given this behavior, I would say Sparkplug is insecure by default. I would say it's insecure by default, depending upon how you define what's secure. Okay. Sparkplug, which is a industrial specification for MQTT, it's a minimalist specification. It's designed to be flexible. Arlen Nipper is going to talk about this on Friday in our podcast we shoot during Mastermind. Sparkplug assumes, in general, that you are creating a node out of a device. When they originally wrote the spec, they were thinking that people would put Sparkplug on board of instruments. So right here, I have this Shark device from Mr. IIoT, Chris Meashtor in Chicago. This is a device that takes a M2 field bus, right? PNP, NPN, and then allows you to convert a dumb sensor into a smart sensor that talks MQTT. Okay. The original idea was that you would make this a Sparkplug edge of network node. You would make a PLC a Sparkplug edge of network node. You would make an industrial PC an edge of a network node. And then you would apply the security to this whole device, not to a data point on the device, but to the device itself. That was the original idea. You either have permission to access the device or you don't have permission. One of the limitations of Sparkplug is that it is device centric. Okay, so that's what when he talks security, I say, well, no, it's insecure if your expectation is that you're going to use Sparkplug for something to create an edge of network node where you need more granular restrictions of access. But either in general, you have access to a PLC or you don't. In general, you have access to a device or you don't. And that's how the Sparkplug spec is written. So I said to Randy, that's because zero trust is a terrible strategy for a digital organization. The only people who think zero trust is smart, so locking out your own people by default, are the people who have no idea what the risks actually are, or the people whose career started in the 80s or the 90s. Okay, you start with default. What we should do is start with default, role-based security with access control lists, limiting your access to the device. You either have permission to talk to it or you don't. Okay. And then you whittle down based on risk analysis. So if I need to apply even more security to this, that's what I do. Like, for example, not give access to the wire that's connected to this. Okay. You don't start with dark or gray data for all and hope every use case gets justified. Okay. The digital organization is filled with people like you and me. So Amazon, Tesla, Volkswagen North America, they are filled with people who are like me, like Randy Armstrong, like Rick Bellata, like Zach, like everyone on our team, people with very high digital fluency. Okay. They're filled with people like you and me, not idiot Joe and moron Bill. Digital fluency is the most powerful risk mitigator. It's not locking down your organization. It's filling your organization with people who understand the risk. Okay. I don't fall for a phishing attack. I don't fall for malware. I understand what two-factor authentication is. I know what a sufficient password is. I know not to write my password on a fucking sticky note and put it on my monitor. Okay? Digital fluency is the most powerful risk mitigator. Data enablement teams are manifestations of CT knows, not CTO, who is a transformative and disruptive leader. Ford followed your strategy, zero trust, and it has fucking killed them and killed their employees' jobs. Why do you think they outsourced their intellectual property? Some 50-plus-year-old actuary, that's somebody who calculates risk and insurance, a 50-plus-year-old CTO shit themselves because they heard some story about ransomware somewhere and said, lock it all down. Or, more importantly, outsource our risk to our suppliers. I'm talking to you, Bosch. Why is it that Bosch owns the IP in the electronic control modules or in the window modules in a Ford car? Because someone at Ford said, we don't trust our people. We want to mitigate our risk. We want Bosch to be responsible for the risk, not us. And then what did Jim Farley say last August? One of the key reasons they're not going to be able to catch Tesla?
Because they don't own the IP.
Because they don't own the intellectual property. Why do they not own the intellectual property? Because they have a zero trust mindset. Okay? You cannot transform an organization without rock stars like you and me. And people like you and me don't work for the end user because A, they can't afford us, and B, we aren't going to work in an environment where we spend all of our time making justifications for why we need access to the data we want. You want to know what the number one complaint is when we do a DTMA? All of you in the community who do DTMAs, and you do the 5 meetings with the 5 subgroups. Okay, so we do a 23-point questionnaire, and it's like, what are you good at? What are you bad at? What's missing? And then we do the 5 groups: engineering, operations, IT, leadership, and quality. And we ask them, what is your number one problem? What do they always say?
Access to data.
Access to the fucking data they need to do their jobs. Number one complaint. 91% of the time. Why don't they have access? Zero trust. Why are companies not digitally transforming? Because you are not enabling people to solve problems in your business by unlocking the data that is all around them.
With a common infrastructure.
On a common infrastructure that is inherently safe.
With citizen developers.
Jesus. It is folly. It is folly. Randy, tell me why you think that after 20 years, OPC UA has had microscopic adoption. Have you watched the growth curves of Sparkplug versus OPC UA, part 14, or any other part of the spec? What good is a standard if no one uses it? Microsoft's grand plan has failed. And what I mean is OLE for process control. So you get people to adopt it so they can build an industrial operating system you got to buy from Microsoft. Okay. It's just that simple. What good is data if you can't access it? Short time to value is a must, pure and simple. How do you think this community has grown so fast? Why do you think people only go in one direction in this argument? From OPC UA to MQTT and or Sparkplug, not the other way around. How do you explain John Rinaldi's mea culpa on MQTT? How do you explain that Arlen, the co-inventor of MQTT, has nothing to do with OPC UA? Not he has a little to do with OPC UA. He has fucking nothing to do with OPC UA. Nothing. Come on, Randy. You must see these trends. I have never seen a group who is more hamstrung by hubris than the OPC Foundation or Microsoft.
Purnell's iron law of bureaucracy.
Do you know where the new Azure IoT architecture came from? Do you know that Microsoft is going to drop AMQP? And why? I'll tell you what. I'll pay for you to come down to Dallas and deep dive on what we do. I'll take you to one of our clients here. I'll show you who we work with. I'll pay for everything. In exchange, you sign an NDA and agree to come on this podcast and debate this topic publicly. I 100% guarantee you will change your mind. You'll have no choice. Now, that's sort of a summary of what our conversation was back and forth. Let me say this. Randy Armstrong is a top-notch guy. This is not me trashing Randy. Okay? It's not. This is me giving you my definitive opinion on OPC UA and Randy's opinion. Randy said, the OPC Foundation is a highly political organization. It is very political. He said, industry is very slow to adopt standards. Okay, I agree. But 20 fucking years, man? 20 years? And 80% of the spec is in no product? And I'm the asshole? Like, seriously. Okay, here's the other thing he said. OPC UA is an OT protocol, and it belongs in OT and only in OT. He did put a caveat in there using MQTT to take OPC UA information models and put them up in the cloud, which, by the way, we all want. The conversation ended, and I wanted to say this. Randy's a brilliant dude, smart fucking guy. There needs to be more Randy Armstrongs at the OPC Foundation. Let me say that. Let me say it again. There needs to be more Randy Armstrongs at the OPC Foundation. If I could snap my fingers, I would replace either Eric Barnstadt or Stefan Hoppe at the OPC Foundation with Randy Armstrong. That's what I would do. Okay. one last.
You would say that there would still be a need for the OPC Foundation?
Absolutely. What I say is, just like they had to eventually abandon OPC Classic and they had to abandon OPC DA, I think they have to abandon UA. I think they need to start from scratch. They can keep UA and they need to come with a parallel standard that starts from absolute scratch.
What would you call it?
And put a new Part 14 at the centerpiece of it. And I'll say this, Randy Armstrong said at the very end of our exchange, he said, my goal is to be able to plug a PLC into a network, into an infrastructure, point it to the infrastructure and stream the OPC.
Do.
That's exactly what we already do.
But just not OPC.
We just don't do it with OPC. We use gateways to convert OPC UA namespaces into MQTT topical namespaces. One of the biggest challenges in writing a third-party gateway that does that is that so much of the OPC UA specification is optional. You don't know, like a PLC that says OPC on board isn't the same as another PLC that says an OPC on board. So much of the spec is optional. Like attributes, for example, if you're not familiar with the OPC spec, right? A variable node inside of an OPC UA namespace is basically a tag. Okay, a variable node is a thing that has values that change. Okay, a variable node, there are attributes. There's a whole list of UA attributes that are essentially like node dot attribute. You have to, the only people who know which attributes were used are the ones who implemented OPC in that device, because they're not required to use all the attributes. And that's just one example of a million examples of options in the OPC UA specification, which is why all of you are banging your fucking heads against the wall trying to integrate OPC UA with your infrastructure, which is why Highbyte is a tool we must be using. Because you know what we do with Highbyte? You know what everyone does with an OPC UA information model? Everybody takes it, strips out all the noise, and pulls out the value, the quality, and the timestamp. They package it up and they send it to the infrastructure. Why? Because that's the event everyone cares about. In the end, what we agreed, what Randy and I agreed, and Randy, let me say it, this is, I don't want anyone to think that I have nothing but the utmost respect for Randy Armstrong. Top-notch guy, top-notch character. Balls of steel, and he fucking knows he knows his shit. Okay? But even Randy, ultimately, if you read that whole thread, he had to concede that everything that I've been saying is true. Now, he's not going to come on. He is part of a very political organization, so he's not going to be able to just come on here. But read for yourself, assuming he doesn't delete all of his messages. All right. All right. Any questions in there? Any comments about what I've been saying here? Hopefully people just agree. Vaughn, preach. Thanks, Annabelle.
We got to talk about Highbyte releasing the 2-hour demo.
Yes. All right. That is my definitive position is OPC UA is an OT protocol. It is not an IoT protocol. Even people of the OPC Foundation acknowledge that. Okay. What I'm hoping is there's a path forward. And I said this to Arlen today in our call. What I'm hoping is this engagement with the OPC Foundation, with Randy Armstrong specifically. Thank you, Randy. Okay. Your engagement, and I told him this in a DM, like, dude, I really super appreciate you engaging. You know, he said your rhetoric, your approach turns people off. You have to have thick skin to deal with you. And really what he was saying was, you know, there are other people at the OPC Foundation who don't have thick skin and they don't want to deal with you. And you know what I said? Then they don't belong in leadership. Let me say this again. Emil, realistically, what do you think will eventually happen to OPC UA? Well, honestly, worst case scenario, Emil, worst case scenario is the OPC Foundation becomes exclusively for Microsoft, Rockwell, Beckhoff, partner, Beck proper, and their partners. Okay. That's the worst case. Okay. I mean, that's what it is today anyway. They'll just stop making the argument. But I'll just say this. There's nothing I said in those videos that weren't true. There's nothing I've been saying that isn't true. There's nothing that I'm saying that isn't true. They just didn't like the way I said it. And I don't fucking care. Honestly, yeah. I even told Randy, I'm like, Randy, your feelings are not my problem. Manufacturing jobs are my problem. And by the way, to his credit, he didn't take offense but there are definitely other people at the foundation who take offense. And they're in leadership. And by virtue of his comment, they have thin skin. They don't belong in leadership. They're not equipped to lead. They're not equipped to lead. I wrote a scathing email to the folks at Litmus Automation. And we're doing a thing with Litmus on Friday. We're doing. Hold on a second. I want to give you an example of leadership. Okay, what real leadership is. My team. This is true. My team set aside 4 hours for me to do a benchmarking test using Litmus Edge and their broker and UNS in containers. Okay, Litmus does not publicly publish their containers because there's an IP thing. People were basically using the Docker container to try and reverse engineer drivers. Anyway, I went to go do this work on a Sunday night. It's like 7:00. My plan was to do the development from like 7 to 11. 10 o'clock in the morning, Vaughn sent an email to the point person we were working with at Litmus that, hey, Walker's going to be doing this in containers. And that engineer never responded. And when I realized the container wasn't part of any of the notes that they sent to me, and that if you read the documentation, it said you had to reach out to your sales rep to get a link, I wrote a scathing fucking email to Litmus. Like, you wasted my time. I'm not going to partner with a company. Like, we have an expectation you're going to respond in 4 hours. That's the deal with us. And it was a scathing email. And I did it because I believe in conflict theory. I'm at the top of the food chain. I believe that if you're talking to me in a partnership, and that means you didn't deliver for one of the people who work for me, and it's my job to be a dick. That's what I believe. Okay? It works, by the way. It works. And the highest performers in the world are assholes. I hate to break the news to you. It doesn't mean they don't have soft skills. They do. But they know when to be an asshole.
This is a story about Elon Musk and the idiot index.
In the idiot index, right?
Where he asked the guy.
But Vatzel reached out to me. He's he's the founder and CEO at Litmus, and he read the scathing email, and he didn't take it personally. He knew that they needed to address it, and he addressed it. He didn't go. His skin wasn't thin. He focused on the problem. He knew what I was doing. He knew what my job was. So if you're at the OPC Foundation and you're offended that I said things that are all true, that members of your own foundation are fucking acknowledging are true. By the way, later in this thread, he goes, well, you said things that were inaccurate. And then I just said, no, it wasn't inaccurate. Here's the truth. And he never rebutted. He had to acknowledge it was right. I encourage you to go to the OPC UA channel and read that whole thread. It's a very long one. I dedicated a whole weekend to it. Okay. But the definitive position is OPC UA is an OT protocol. What do I think is going to happen? You know what? I'm actually positive, Emil. I'm positive. I think what's going to happen, I believe that Randy Armstrong, who I think he chairs the Part 14 subcommittee or the Part 14 working group, Randy, he understands the problems manufacturers are facing. He understands the limitations of the spec. He just writes it off as adoptions of specifications and development of specs is slow going. There's a couple of issues that they have at OPC. Okay. Number one, they believe if you read their code of conduct is designed to control speech. Okay. So if you're a high performer, you're going to struggle there. You're really going to struggle. Okay. They believe in a consensus mentality. So that means everybody on the working group's got to kind of agree in order for them to do something. No, that's not how I don't run my companies like that. The subject matter expert, if Arlen Nipper went to the working group and said, you know what, we ought to use Google Protobuf for encoding in the spec. He is the subject matter expert when it comes to MQTT. It is incumbent upon the working group to make the argument. They have to make the argument and win the argument with Arlen as to why it is you shouldn't be using Google Protobuf.
Best
You
idea
don't
wins.
you don't just say we're invested into our binary encoding and that's just the way it's going to be. Because that's why you don't have Arlen Nipper sitting on the Part 14 working group. And guess who needs to be on that working group? Arlen Nipper. I mean, how are you even legitimate if you don't have Andy Stanford Clark and Arlen Nipper on there? The inventors of the fucking protocol. Like, how are you even legitimate?
What if they're like, all right, Walker, we're promoting you to the president of the OPC Foundation?
Stefan and Eric are gone fucking 2 days ago.
That was the first thing you would do?
No question. Stefan and Eric would be gone. I would never. And that decision would
too political.
It's way too political. You would eliminate the political animals. It's not that Eric isn't a world-class fucking architect. He is. Part of the reason I'm so hard on Eric Barnstead is he knows better. I mean, if I didn't think he knew better, if I didn't think he was equipped, technically, I wouldn't pick a fight with him. I only pick fair fights. He knows better. He's just choosing to be a political animal. Now, that's
how he's a VP at Microsoft.
Right, that's how he's elevated to where he's at. Okay. But the first thing I would do is I would say there needs to be new leadership of the OPC Foundation. Okay. Moreover, I would start recruiting what I'd be doing. And by the way, the Sparkplug working group has the same problem. You know, when Rick Bellotta reached out to the Sparkplug working group with a list of here's some things you need to do, here's some gaps in your specification, and they fucking blew him off. I don't know. Rick is Wonderware System Platform. I mean, he is System Platform and he's ThingWorks. Moreover, he's, SAP MII. There is no more accomplished person in our fucking industry than Rick Bellotta. Let me say it again. There's no one has built more shit for our industry than Rick Bellotta. So when Rick Bellotta reaches out to a standards organization and says, here's your fucking gaps, you better listen. It's pure hubris if you don't. Okay, guess what? The Sparkplug working group is listening. When I met with Arlen Nipper at ICC a couple of years ago and said, hey, here's Rick's list, he said, listen, I fucking agree. He goes, the problem is we don't have enough participation. We need more people making the decisions in the working group, which is the reason we're going to have him on the podcast Friday. People need to set their egos aside. I may be an asshole and I have an ego in the moment, but there is nobody on my team. There is nobody. None of these guys are going to tell you that I am not the first person who admits I'm wrong when I'm wrong. I am the first person who admits I'm wrong. So Emil, what I think is going to happen, have I ever considered being on the OPC board? I have never considered it. No, I haven't. That doesn't mean that I would rule it out. I wouldn't. But I've never.
That would be so funny.
I've never considered. I mean, the reality is let me tell you guys a little story. In the digital age, there's no such thing as a private conversation, and I operate that way. Okay, I believe everything I say. If I'm text messaging somebody, if I'm DMing somebody, I expect. I think there's a high likelihood that what we talked about is going to get shared with other people, even if they said they're not going to tell anybody. Okay. People in highly political bodies believe they can still control the message. Do you know how many people who have worked with the OPC Foundation have reached out to me because I am a vocal critic and said, you know what, you're 100%. Nobody is messaging me and saying you're wrong. The only person who messaged me with a complaint was Stefan Hoppy, or I don't know if it's Hop or Hoppy. Nobody from the working groups is going, hey, dude, you're fucking wrong. Randy was the first one to engage. And Randy is much closer to my position than I am to his. That was not it. There's nobody who's going to read that thread and think he won that debate. What we did was we agreed. What we realized is we agreed on a lot more than we thought we did. And he realized I knew the specification. He started out like I'm just a troll. okay, first of all, I didn't get to where I am in my life trolling. But my father used to say, when you walk into a room, you are either the smartest person when it comes to that subject, or you keep your mouth shut and you listen. Emil, what I think is going to happen is I think collaboration is going to happen. That's what I think. I think, and as long as Randy Armstrong has something to say about it, I believe that there will be a middle ground. I really do. It is not, Rick Bellotta and I say this all the time, and it's kind of funny. The holy war, this holy war on OPC UA and MQTT, it all came from me saying OPC UA is not an IoT protocol. And guess what? It is not.
It still is not.
Either or. It isn't either or. It's both.
Yeah.
Right.
But
You didn't say there was no place for it.
There's a
I
place.
think back then in 2020, most people probably didn't realize what you were talking about when you said it's not an IoT protocol.
Yeah.
It took people years to catch up to the digital fluency to realize where it actually fell short.
Yeah. And hopefully after this conversation, people understand a little better why I think Highbyte is so important. I also think Snowflake is incredibly critical. And we're going to talk about this with Arlen on Friday.
Snowflake is the best UNS database.
It is. It's an absolute fucking game changer, dude. It is the marketplace for commoditizing your data. And the way that they built Snowflake, you know, how compute and warehousing is separate, it makes scalability like unlimited scalability. And then it is literally the marketplace from which you can commoditize your data and sell it. And it natively integrates. Do you know how easy it is to integrate?
What's the next step after Snowflake? Like, let's say when you have the models that are trained on this data,
AI.
Where's the model marketplace? Like,
right now it's the Wild West. It's all a function of the data scientists you put on the job.
Because that's what Tesla's trying to do. Is they have the FSD data, they're trying to license the software to other, OEMs.
Let me, I want to go into one last comment before and then call it, because I figured we'd probably go 90 minutes and we're right at 90 right now. Today, we've known this for a little while and we weren't allowed to talk about it publicly. Today, we can talk about it publicly. Highbyte 3.4 was released today. Aaron Semley, who's the CTO at Highbyte, he did an announcement. I reshared it on my LinkedIn. Highbyte has implemented a 2-hour resettable license, pure land and expand. And as far as I understand, there are a couple of our other partners. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying it, but is it okay if I say this, Vaughn, or should I just not say it?
I would
don't say it.
Okay. Say it. All right. So another one of our partners is getting ready to they're working on it right now. And they're a new partner of ours. They're working on the 2-hour resettable license as well, following the inductive automation model. Highbyte, the 3.4 release, now has a 2-hour resettable license. So you can download it without having to talk to anybody. It's the same model as inductive automation. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, we use Highbyte in everything. Like next week, I am doing a speech for, am I allowed to mention the speech I'm doing in San Francisco?
It's internal. No,
I can't mention that at all.
No, it's internal training.
All right. So I'm giving a speech to a member of the Ming stack. I can say that at least. So one of the companies that's in the Ming stack, I'm giving a speech there. It's an internal group training for their group. And I'm talking about how their product offerings are being used in Industry 4. And I'm showing integrations. Okay. I'm showing how that works. Okay. And if you look at the stack that I'm going to be deploying, so I'm going to actually be deploying a stack using Portainer to a series of containers that all natively connect to each other and they plug into a UNS infrastructure and just start streaming data. And each of the applications all have access to the full unified namespace, fully stateful, self-aware. Highbyte is always part of that deployment. Always. That I mean, literally every single environment includes Ignition or Factory Studio. But we don't deploy Factory Studio in a container. Ignition or Factory Studio, MySQL or Postgres, Highbyte, Node-RED, InfluxDB, they're all deployed Grafana, they're all deployed together, and they're all fully stateful.
Possibly Litmus Broker, or no?
What we do is we pass in environment variables that give you the connection, your login to the brokers, and the brokers manage your access control, and everything is natively integrated. And I'm going to be doing that. Okay. We're using Highbyte in everything. If you are not working on your Highbyte fluency, if you're not, Highbyte is making it as easy as possible to download their data ops platform and integrate it into your infrastructure. Now you can do it 2 hours at a time. You ain't got to talk to anybody. You can build your proof of concept, and then you can go pay for your license later. Okay. It's true land and expand. If you're not doing it, you're making a mistake.
Well, let's just say, for devil's advocate, someone who can't afford Highbyte, what is their alternative? And they don't want to model an ignition.
Yeah, I would say Yasir. So Yasir is what is the name of Yasir's platform again?
Maestro Hub.
Maestro Hub. So Maestro Hub is equivalent. It is another platform that is similar to Highbyte, right? This data ops platform. They're very similar. Yasir just said that they're also working on pure land and expand. I'm assuming.
I love Highbyte. It's just the most common feedback we get is that it's too expensive. Personally, I don't think it's too expensive because I'm looking at it from the perspective of that's less than an engineer. So, I mean, if you have a one engineer team, then maybe you don't have the budget. But if you have you're spending a few $100,000 a year on your team, what is $20,000?
Yeah, I'll say this. In year one, it's easy to think, oh, Highbyte is too expensive, or not even in year one. In the first 90 days of your journey, you might be like, why do I got to spend that money on that license? There's nobody who's a year in who is like, yeah, we're paying peanuts for that. Like when you're
because of the value it creates.
Yeah, because you realize all of the value in digital transformation comes from data operations. Like you realize data ops is actually the point. It's like if you look at a common unified namespace, we talked about this today. We actually we looked at all of our clients, and what we did is we defined every single data point inside of a unified namespace. It was defined as one of three types. Number one, it's an IT type. Number two, it's an OT type. And number three, it is a coalesce type. A coalesce type comes from data operations. You take the stuff from IT and OT and you create something else. Okay, 30% of the data that is inside of a unified namespace comes from OT. 10% of that data comes from IT. Just my point, IT is not where your business happens because only 10% of the data points come from the IT side of the business. 60% of the data is coalesced. 60% of the stuff in a unified namespace is from data operations. Data operations is the most important thing you do. It is the conversion of data into business.
Into information.
All right, one last thing. Going to be at Hanover Messe. My whole schedule has been booked, but if you, the best place to, if you're at Hanover and you want to, see if we can just meet up real quick, say hi or whatever, the best place is to DM me in Discord at, what is my handle? Walker Reynolds, at Walker Reynolds. You DM me in Discord, let me know you're there, and we'll try to coordinate and meet up. I'll be there. I get in Sunday night. I'm leaving Friday, flying back to the States on Friday, but I'll be at Hanover Messe Monday through Thursday while we're there. Any other questions in there, Josh, you think I need to respond to before we get going? Hopefully this was valuable.
Josh said no.
Oh, awesome. All right. Zach, Vaughn, any parting words?
Yes, I think after this Highbyte announcement and then everything we've been talking about with Ignition over the past few years, if you are not doing land and expand and making this available to the hands of everyone, you are stupid. And I will not retract my stupid statement.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest challenge, people face is they don't know where to start. Or they've started and they were sold a bill of goods. It brings me back to the whole values thing. Well, what was the thing? Redshift versus Snowflake all day long. Snowflake all day long. You know, and let me say this. It's very important to say. I have no commercial relationship with Highbyte. So I make no money from Highbyte. We don't take any money from them. They don't pay me to do anything. The only thing Highbyte, we work with them. They ask for my opinion on stuff, and we have a good working relationship. I've introduced them to lots of vendors. I'll meet a vendor and I'll go, you know what, you need to, like the Tulip thing. We coordinated a meeting between Tulip. I'm like, how are you guys? You're in the same region. How do you guys not even working together? And we are a strategic partner, and we get a company license for our Highbyte, but they do not pay me to, you know, I'm not obligated to say good things about them. I'm critical. I was critical of Land and Expand. You know, when I give you my opinion on something, it is my honest opinion, good, bad, or worse. And when a vendor reaches out to us and says, hey, we want to partner with you, Walker, literally the first thing I say is, you have to know that if I hate your product, I'm going to say it. And if I have a criticism of your product, I'm going to say it. Okay. I want to say one last thing before we go. Okay. A lot of you are sending me links to other people's posts and stuff about unified namespace. You know, there's integrators out there who are representing that they know, you know, what UNS is and stuff. I mean, in fact, even Randy made a comment. Let me get to this real quick. When Randy and I were going back and forth, he said, you know, Walker, you said things that weren't true too. And he said, you know, hey, you're arguing. All right, hold on a second. Let's go to this. Randy said, when it comes to inaccurate statements, you should remember you've made many of your own. One comes to mind is the claim that OPC UA is not report by exception. Okay. It is, but the client server services combines notifications with flow control and error recovery logic, so you do not see a simple callback on data change. Okay. Literally, he said, one claim, you said an inaccurate statement. OPC UA is not report by exception. And then the very next sentence is, it is but. Whenever somebody says it is but, it means that the statement you said was right. Okay, I mean, it's just that simple. He goes, it is, but the client server services combines notifications with flow control and error recovery logic, so you do not see a simple callback on data change. All of the capabilities baked into an OPC UA client server subscription are implemented by the MQTT protocol, so buffering, acknowledgements, resend, etc. So if OPC UA is not report by exception because of this reliability features, then neither is MQTT. And this is what I said. MQTT by default is report by exception. OPC UA by default is not. Okay. That is, the spec assumes that clients will report by exception, but it leaves the flexibility to report on trigger or on interval. OPC UA is not report by exception by default. How do we know? Because all one has to do is put a sniffer on the wire and watch what comes through. And he referenced it in his statement. You can call my statement nuanced, but you cannot call it inaccurate. It is, but, in quotes, in your statement is only further confirmation that I was right. You have to take into account the context of my statement. If an IoT protocol is open, edge-driven, lightweight, and report by exception, then OPC UA is not an IoT protocol. If I make a claim that OPC UA is not report by exception, and your response is, quote, it is, but, then it's not report by exception. My statement is accurate. The discussion is what is nuanced. And he said, you are arguing semantics. And then he followed up, Eric Barnstedt is not wrong to say OPC UA has implemented UNS since 2018 if you defined UNS to publish data with context to a broker. But these debates are sideshow. What I'm saying is both sides say things that piss each other off, and the response is to just stop talking. No, I don't. When they say, both Stefan Hoppe said things that were wrong, and I highlighted them up above. Eric Barnstedt has said things. He literally did a post saying, hey, good news, everybody. Did you know that OPC UA has been unified namespace since 2016? And I was like, no, it fucking hasn't. Okay. I mean, it is not. It is absolutely not true.
Do you see the new thing they're pushing, like WNS or something?
Web of Things.
Yeah, WOT. It's not now. Yeah. It's no longer IoT. It's WOT.
Yeah, it's the Web of Things. It's it's just another bullshit thing. We'll debate that part later. But I just said Eric is flat out wrong. They're just flat out wrong. If he says OPC UA has been unified namespace since 2016, Eric Barnstedt is flat out wrong. That's what I wrote, and then I pasted in what unified namespace is. So let's go ahead and just clarify that real quick. Number one,
how does it make you feel to say Eric is wrong and no, you're right?
Actually, it doesn't make me feel good at all. And in fact, if I'm being honest with you, it disappoints me. It disappoints me. Let me give you this example.
I laugh, but I know what you're saying is true.
I'm a big basketball fan. I grew up, Michael Jordan was my hero growing up. Okay. Michael Jordan was born gifted, and then he worked his ass off to maximize his gifts. And no one could ever look at Michael Jordan and say he didn't do the absolute most with what he was born with. By the way, cool fact. We were at the NASCAR race a few weeks ago. We had a suite at Circus of the Americas. We were there visiting another engineering firm that I was consulting with. And Michael Jordan had the two suites next to us. You want to talk about a baller. Okay, first off, those suites were like $250,000. He had two of them for like 6 people. And get this, he was him and his son were like right down he had more security with him than he did people he was talking to. And they were, right down, and they had a security guard on our side and a security guard on the other side. And they were like, no pictures, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he actually got the suite directly in front of pit box 23. He was literally you want to talk about savage, just like he didn't just spend $500,000 on 2 suites so he would be away from no one. He sat in the middle of the 2 suites so that the people that he had to be near were absolutely the furthest ways they could be. But he got the suite directly in front of box 23. But anyway, Michael Jordan was my hero growing up. He absolutely maximized his gifts, 100%. And then you look at who's the power forward who played for the San Antonio Spurs, and then he went to Toronto and won an NBA championship, and now he plays for the Clippers. Who's
not Dennis Rodman?
Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, Kawhi Leonard. So Kawhi Leonard is an example of someone who disappoints me. Okay, Kawhi Leonard is a highly gifted athlete, born with lots of gifts, but he does the bare minimum with his gifts. Okay, and he went to LA, he went to the Clippers to hide. You know what I mean? And when his career's done, it's all about him. It's not about something grander. Michael, it's the same thing with LeBron James. Michael did the absolute most. The disappointment I feel when I'm, talking about Eric, and the only reason I'm picking on him is because he's in a position of power that is sending the OPC UA the OPC Foundation in a direction it shouldn't go, and he's saying things they shouldn't.
Microsoft
and at Microsoft, Azure IoT. Listen, he's in the position where he's supposed to take the criticism.
What would you imagine his defense of that is?
There is no defense. It's Eric's about Eric. And I don't mean that in a bad. I don't mean a pejorative.
Not like, oh, come on, man, I couldn't have seen that coming, or not even like what he would say.
Let me ask you this: what does it say that Eric Barnstedt doesn't engage with us? What does it say that he doesn't allow people to comment on his posts? He can make claims, but the only people who are allowed to comment on his claims are the people he's approved.
People agree with him, yeah.
What does that say about him?
He does not like conflict.
It says he wants to control the message.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to control the message? I want a debate. I want to get better every single day. I want a debate.
The best idea wins.
The best idea must win. It doesn't have to be my idea. It's got to be the best idea. And that's what drives me. So to answer your question, no, this is not fun. It sucks and it disappoints me. I'm disappointed. That's what it is. But I am confident we're going in the right direction. I really am. I do believe there's a middle ground. And it'll be my job as the Industry 4 community and the OPC group start steering. The OPC Foundation's never going to admit they're wrong. They're just going to change their tack. You know what I mean? They're just going to start coming back in gradually. It'll be my job. I've done my job, which is to push everybody in the right direction, and then I will gracefully bow out. You know, I'm not the guy you put on the board at the OPC Foundation. You know what I mean? Like I was on school board back in my hometown. Everybody asked me to run for school board. Well, it started with everybody hated the superintendent, and we need to bring in Walker to get rid of him because everybody else is afraid of the guy's power. I wasn't. So literally the community recruited me to come in, start going to school board meetings and challenging the superintendent. It only took about a year to get him to leave. And then I spoke literally on the day they announced that he was leaving for another school district. I literally got up and said, this is great news for the district. I'm happy to see it. People were applauding. And I'm like, and I hope we don't make the same mistake again. His tenure here is an example of what we don't want. Now, most people with soft skills would gracefully, you know, they would pretend, you know, they'd be cordial and we wish you good luck and they wouldn't throw any haymakers. That's not me. My job is I'm going to kick you in the ass on your way out because I don't want you to hire someone like him again. And then I recommended another superintendent. They hired that superintendent. I ran for school board. And then before I relocated to Texas, I resigned from the school board. I'm a change agent. I'm a disruptor. I'm a transformative leader. I don't belong on political bodies. I don't. That's not my place. Okay. All right. We went way over. Hopefully this is value. Do me a favor. Comment down below whether this was a valuable conversation. If this went way too long and we meandered too much and this conversation wasn't valuable to you, I want to know, because we won't do it again. We'll go back to the 1 hour format and we'll pre-record them and we won't riff it like this, you know. And I want to close with, I want to thank Randy Armstrong. I really believe the OPC Foundation is going to go in the right direction. I do. And I want to thank Randy Armstrong for engaging with the community. The guy legitimately wants to do good for manufacturers. I wish I could say the same for everyone else. And maybe that's the case. Hopefully we'll get, maybe Stefan and Eric will reach out and say, hey, we want to come on the podcast, 2 of us. Hell, I'll take it 2-on-1. Come on. And let's talk, you know, let's break bread and have a conversation for the benefit of the Industry 4 community. All right. With that, like, subscribe, comment down below. Thank you guys for watching, listening on the podcast, and we will see you in the next one.